Canaan, and Yaakov settled in the land of his father, the land of where his father lived, in the land of Canaan. Because of who, the simple meaning of this pasuk is that Yaakov established his living quarters. Where would he live? He established it in the place where his father Yitzchak lived. The Rebbe is going to explain what's the background of what Rashi says that Yaakov bikesh leisha b'shalva, that Yaakov wanted to be settled and sit in a peaceful manner. What does that mean that Yaakov wanted to settle in a peaceful manner? So it says, but we need to understand, or what led Rashi to that interpretation. Excuse me. You need to understand that it says prior to this, by Yaakov that Yaakov came to Yitzchak, his father. Ray says that earlier, before Parshas Vayesh. And even afterwards, it says, Yitzchak Vayamos. It even said that Yitzchak expired and he passed away. So before our Parsha, before Parshas Vayesh, Yaakov was already settled in by his father, and his father lived his full life, and then he passed away. This was many years after Yaakov came to him. Moving for this understood. This we understand. That Yaakov coming to his father, Yitzchak, was not a temporary thing. He came there and he didn't settle in, but later he settled in. No, he was there, his father passed away. So if he was settled in, if he was there to live, so what is it coming over here? What is the pasuk coming up over here with something new that he says that Yaakov established his dwelling place in the land of where his father lived? The pasuk already established this from the whole continuation of what went on in the previous parsha. Therefore, that led Rashi to the explanation that's brought down the Medrash. Rashi, it's brought down the Medrash. It's also said, the Medrash says, it's also brought down Rashi's commentary. Yaakov requested to sit in tranquility. Hashem said, is it insufficient for tzaddikim, what's prepared for them for the world to come? But they want to sit in tranquility in this world. So the question is, without knowing the introduction of what the Rebbe just now said, there's a lot of times in Chumash where it speaks about people settled in a certain place. What over here is said in the pasuk? What is it about the pasuk by Yeshiv Yaakov be'eretz meguri aviv that all of a sudden triggered the Medrash to say such a thing? Bikesh Yaakov leisha b'shalva. What is it? But based on what we explained previously, that this wasn't when Yaakov settled in. Yaakov settled in a long time ago. So rather, this teaches us that the lesson that the Medrash is trying to say, line 14, this is explained the uniqueness. Because of Vayesh Yaakov in the pasuk that Yaakov settled, the intention over here is being settled in a tranquil place, in a tranquil situation, in a peaceful situation. So that's why it says over here, Yeshiv Yaakov. This is what he wanted to do, and Kafetz Olav Rugzi Shal Yosef, and the upset of Yosef occurred. Okay, this is the background of what led the Medrash to say this. Now we need to understand the general concept. What's the problem? Why not? Line 16. We need to understand what Hashem said. It's insufficient for tzaddikim, the reward that they're going to have in the world to come. So the question is, what's so terrible? Yaakov wanted to have a peaceful life. That's such a horrible thing. In the Kimchi, because Yaakov, and the Rebbe says by Yaakov especially, it's not just an ordinary person wants to have a peaceful life. Yaakov, who was very critical of himself, like we'll soon see in a moment. And despite the fact that he was very careful with himself and he was very critical of himself, he still desired to sit in peace. So for sure, why would Hashem hold it against him? Since Yaakov wanted to sit in peace and tranquility, he knew that he is worthy of it, to be sitting in tranquility. And here he adds what I was saying before. But we find earlier that when Yaakov davened Hashem to save him from Esau, so and he did all the different types of preparations for war and send him gifts and so on, and he was scared, even though Hashem promised him, "I will protect you," but he was scared, as we know, from the sin, like Rashi brings down. He was worried that maybe after all the kindness, after all the kindness that Hashem showed him by saving him from Lavan, and he was worried that he was insufficiently protected because of his mitzvahs, that maybe he did something wrong, and therefore he was unworthy of Hashem's protection. So this was a person that was very critical of himself and was very concerned that he's unworthy. And therefore over here, if a person that's so careful about himself and so concerned about his spiritual state, if he's worthy of something, when he wanted to be in a peaceful state, top of Peish Chavches, surely he knew that he reached such a level that he's worthy to sit in peace and tranquility. And another proof of this, that Yaakov Avinu was worthy of it, Chazal say that there were three individuals that while they were alive in this world, they tasted of Olam Haba. They had a little bit of a taste of what Olam Haba is. The Koyala Avos, these three people that the Chazal are talking about, they're talking about the three Avos, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Therefore, Yaakov, who's known as the most chosen of the three Avos, Yaakov is supposed to be the chosen one of the Avos. But for sure, he's worthy to sit in peace and tranquility. Therefore, the Rebbe asks, it's not understood. What Hashem said, it's insufficient for tzaddikim that they're going to have the Olam Haba. They want to sit in tranquility in this world. Any questions before we go on to the meat and potatoes? The rest of the mimer primarily is going to talk about Chanukah, till he brings it back at the end to Vayeshev. Okay, Beis, line 7. So now we can get into the sugi of Chanukah. To be able to understand this, in the Chanukah, we need to understand the details of the matters of Chanukah. Gemara is brought down the Gemara in Chanukah mitzvah from Shetishka Chamo. The Chanukah candle, its mitzvah is from when the sun goes down. Mitzvah la'nicha al pesach beis mechutz. The mitzvah is to place it on the entrance to his house from the outside outward. Where does he place it? He puts it on his left. So that a person should have on the right side, they'll have the mezuzah, and on the left side, they'll have the Chanukah menorah. There are three mitzvahs that we find in that Yidden do, that Yidden perform, that involve candles. One is Ner HaMenorah Shoysa HaMikdash, the candle of the menorah that was in the Beis HaMikdash. Another mitzvah involving candles is Ner Shabbos candles that we light. And then there's Ner Chanukah candle. Rebbe is going to emphasize over here, and Ner Chanukah Cholok, Ner HaMikdash, Ner Shabbos, Ner Chanukah is distinct and different from the candles of the Beis HaMikdash and the candles of Shabbos. The Ner HaMikdash mitzvah ladlikim a plaga mincha. The Ner of the Beis HaMikdash, the mitzvah is to kindle them in the afternoon, called plaga mincha, in the place, in the time when it's already like halfway between midday and the time of when we count down mincha. Shukmeshes mamkesh gesachama plaga mincha is a certain duration of time before sundown. That is when the mitzvah is melachatchila to light. Ner Chanukah there is a halacha that if a person won't be able to light it later or whatever, so they can light it from Plag HaMincha. But that's not the time for it. The time for it is later, as opposed to the time for the Neiros in the Beis Hamikdash was at Plag HaMincha. So too, Shabbos candles has to be kindled before sundown. As opposed to the Chanukah candle, the mitzvah is only after the sun sets. So, in general, the Rebbe is dividing the two. The Neiros of the Beis Hamikdash and Neir Shabbos is before sundown. Neir Chanukah is primarily, like the expression of the Gemara is, the mitzvah is Mishatishka Chama, once the sun goes down. Another distinction is the Neir HaMikdash, Mekayim B'fnim HaMikdash, the Neir of the Beis Hamikdash, its place is inside the Mikdash. In the Beis Hamikdash itself, it was in the actual building of the Beis Hamikdash, not in the Azara courtyard, even though there was other things in the Azara. For example, there was the Mizbeach HaChitzon, where they brought the majority of the Karbanis, was in the outer Mizbeach. That was located in the Azara. That was not where the Menorah was. The Menorah was in the enclosed, roofed-in area of the Beis Hamikdash, known as the Heichel. Like we can explain that over there was the Menorah, the Shulchan, the Mizbeach HaKtoides, the golden Mizbeach that was used only for Ktoides. The Heichel is a place that only Kahanim could enter over there. In the Azara, there were certain areas that the Yisrael could enter and so on. But in the Heichel, only Kahanim could enter. And even the Kahanim entering the Heichel, Kahanim are not allowed to enter the Heichel just for a tour or for whatever other reason. They cannot go in there for no purpose, just an empty entrance. Ner Shabbos, in a similar fashion, Ner Shabbos Ubefnim is also inside. What's it mean inside? It's inside the home. But in Yonu Shloim Bayis, the idea of the Ner Shabbos is to bring peace to the home, that a person should not be wandering around the house and tripping and so on. So you must kindle a candle. Therefore, one is obligated to kindle the Ner Shabbos in the room that the meal is taking place, because that's the main place of Shalom Bayis, to be able to make sure that a person doesn't get hurt and be able to eat comfortably and so on. That's the main place to light the Shabbos candle. So again, on the one hand, the Neiros of the Mikdash and the Neiros of Shabbos are all internal. As opposed to the Chanukah candle, the mitzvah is to place it on the entrance to this house from outside, specifically in the Bechutz Davkim. But now a third difference, and another difference, Neir HaMikdash will be a min, that the Beis HaMikdash candle was on the right, because the setup was Menorah Badarim B'Shulchan Matzah. The Menorah is in the south, and the Shulchan was placed on the north side of the Heichel. And as we know, when we face Mizrach, when we're facing east, so south is Yemin, is right, and north is left. And not the Kabbalah and Chassidus, north has to do with the idea of left, and south has to do with the idea of right. So the fact that the Menorah is in the south, that means it's the right. So we find the Menorah of the Beis Hamikdash is on the right. Now he's going to bring an interesting thing, that also the Shabbos licht has to do with the right. Shabbos, so to the Shabbos candle, Isuv Kabbalah, it's brought on Kabbalah in the Sefer called Mishnah Chassidim, Shetzarech Liyos Miyamin. It also has to be on the right. Not exactly sure what it means on the right. It's probably I got to look up over there in Mishnah Chassidim to see what exactly the right is. But Bechlal, Al Pi Kabbalah, every single part of the Shabbos meal by the Arizal, for example, was very strongly enumerated. The different, just reading about the different servings by the Shabbos meal, starting with fish, going to soup, then going to a main course of poultry or meat, then going to a dessert. This is connected Yud Ke Vav Ke according to our result. But anyway, the point is that however it was designed, brought on Kabbalah, that Ner Shabbos had to be also on the right. So again, we find on the one hand, the Beis HaMikdash, the Neres of the Mikdash and Ner Shabbos had the common thing that they were about the right. As opposed to Ner Chanukah has to be specifically on the left. So the Rebbe goes on to say, in the Kudus HaInyim, the point behind this is in line 7. The specific details of Ner Chanukah, that in those specific details, Ner Chanukah is different than the two other mitzvahs of Neres. About the time when we're light, the location of where we light it, et cetera, et cetera. These specifics reflect the entire theme of what Ner Chanukah is about. Isa b'Gemara brought down the Gemara. My Chanukah, what is Chanukah about? When the Greeks entered the Beis HaMikdash, and all that happened that took place, and when the kingdom of the house of Hashmonai overpowered them and was victorious, that they were victorious and defeated the Greeks, that the will and the interest of the Greeks was to make them forget your Torah and to remove them from the statutes of your will. So therefore, all of these things, all of these differences are the reason, all rooted in this, why the Ner Chanukah is on the left, why it's lit after Shkia, why it's specifically inside the house. All of this is reflected in, or a reflection of this idea that they were overcoming the Avonim and wanted the Yidden to forget the Torah and etc. Any questions before we go on? Okay, Eis Gimel, line 14, page Chavtes. The idea behind this is like it's explained in many places. That the decree of the Ivanim was not concerning the study of Torah in general. Rather, like the exact expression, to make them forget your Torah. To make the Eden forget that the Torah is Hashem's Torah. In the Torah it says, it is your wisdom and understanding to the eyes of the nations, meaning that even Goyim understand that Torah is a very logical, intellectual type of study. Even human intellect understands that the wisdom of Torah is a very deep, deep wisdom. And that's why they have a chair of Judaic studies in many different universities, etc. And for this, also the Greeks agree. They agree that the study of Torah should be because of the great quality of its wisdom and intellect, just like you learn any other topic, just like you learn any other subject. Put it in the same syllabus, like you have a chair of Judaic studies, and then you have, studying your toenails. It's all intellect. And the decree of the Ivanim was only to make them forget your Torah. To make the Yidden forget that's the Torah of Hashem. So to concerning the fulfillment of mitzvahs. So their will was to remove it specifically from the statutes of your will specifically. They wanted to make it not your will, and also not chukim, like we know. It's known to a mitzvahs. There are three categories. Eight is chukim mishpatim, testimonial mitzvahs, commemorative mitzvahs. Those are super rational mitzvahs and civil laws. Top of page lamed. Mishpatim ve'edus and mitzvahs yesh lamakim b'seichel. The civil laws and the commemorative mitzvahs. These are mitzvahs that intellect agrees with. Not only civil laws, that these are mitzvahs that the human intellect obligates them and would say, sure, of course, you gotta know. You steal, there's this and this type of result. There's damages to be paid if a person inflicted damages on someone. This is all logic, that logic says you should do this. But also the commemorative mitzvahs, they also have room intellectually. Like, for example, mitzvahs that are commemorating going out of Mitzrayim. Makes sense. Of course, we should celebrate. You know, the Havdalah of Havdalahs, you have countries that celebrate their independence, and it's completely logical. It's not something super rational. But Shabbos is similar vein. Shabbos is a commemoration for the creation. Like it says, in 6 days Hashem made the heavens and the earth. So this makes sense to have a mitzvah to commemorate. So that's the mitzvahs of Eidos that are also logical. As opposed to the super rational decrees, these are such mitzvahs that have no place in intellect whatsoever. Like Chazal say about the chukah that I've made a decree, that is only because Hashem said so, no other reason. That's what it means, that the Greeks wanted to remove the Yidden from the chukim of your will. They did not decree on those mitzvahs that are the civil laws and commemorative mitzvahs. Since they have room and intellect, therefore the Yevonim agreed to it. And the decree was only against mitzvahs that were super rational, to remove them from the decrees of your will, from the chukim. But additional to this, additional to what we're saying, that they had only a problem with the chukim. Also, in other mitzvahs, they agreed that it should be fulfilled only because of the intellectual reason, but not because they're the will of Hashem. As we know concerning the mitzvahs, Hashem says, it was pleasing before me that I said my will was done. So in other words, when you are fulfilling a civil mitzvah, when a Yid is fulfilling a commemorative mitzvah, he should only do it because it makes sense. Not he should do it that because Hashem decreed, despite the fact that it makes sense, but only because it makes sense. But to do it just because it's Hashem's will, that they didn't agree. So do the mishpatim, do the eidos. Make sure don't mix into it anything that's super rational, and do it just because it's Hashem's will. Line 19, second paragraph. So here the Rebbe says something that's not as much emphasized in other places. Most Mamarim emphasize, and Sichos, the Rebbe emphasizes this whole theme that they were okay with the Yidden doing mitzvahs of mishpatim and doing mitzvahs of eidos, as long as they do it as a logical thing. And they were also okay with Yidden learning Torah. But the Rebbe adds over here an interesting thing. This doesn't mean that this was their long-term plan. Their long-term plan was really to completely eradicate Torah mitzvahs. Let's read this again. The main intention of the Yisrael was to stop Yidden from the general idea of studying Torah and fulfilling mitzvahs, even the rational mitzvahs, even studying Torah that's logical. How does that work? He says behind this works as follows. When initially Yidden will cease learning Torah for the reason that it's Hashem's Torah, and they will only learn Torah not because Hashem's Torah. They will only learn Torah because it's logical, because it makes sense, because and initially they would get the Yidden to stop fulfilling those mitzvahs that are super rational. Raise a yavi lebitl close in our Torah mitzvahs. So eventually that would bring about nullifying the general idea of Torah mitzvahs. That's actually very logical. If a person is pursuing Torah mitzvahs just because the logic that's in it, nothing to do with the Eibishter's command, so then, okay, today Torah is an interesting pursuit. Tomorrow, maybe algebra or medicine or some other intellectual idea. Today, I want to commemorate Yitzias Mitzrayim. Tomorrow, I'll just commemorate the 4th of July Lahab. In other words, if it has nothing to do with the Eibishter, eventually, even those mitzvahs that we do because it's logical will stop to be. He brings in, of course, the Vart of the Frierdiker Rebbe to really give it more spice. So he says in the end of line 24, can move him a bit, like it's understood from what my father-in-law said in the Maimar, explained the Maimar Chazal, like today, Yetzirah tells you do so. Till he tells him, go serve Avodah Zarah, go serve idolatry. In other words, that's the insidious way how the Yetzirah creeps up on a person. First, he tells him, do this. Let's see the top of page Lamed Aleph. When a person is serving Hashem, he's studying Torah and fulfilling mitzvahs. In other words, there is the famous interpretation that the Frierdiker Rebbe says that why does it say that the Yetzirah tells the Yid today, tell him do this, like this, and tomorrow he tells him do like this, and then eventually he's going to tell him to do Avodah Zarah, which the simple meaning is first he tells him okay, he'll just eat chol v'akum. The next day he tells him you're in a rush, you can't do Natilas Yadayim, and then eventually he tells him well Muktzah and Shabbos is I don't know, and then eventually it'll lead to Avodah Zarah. That's the simple meaning of Asay Kach. But the word Asay Kach over here is a very strange expression. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says the Yetzirah wants to get into the act. And the Yetzirah says, you're doing Torah mitzvahs? Do it. Asay Kach. Do it. I want you to do the Torah mitzvahs. Line 3, Shagam hu maskim lakach v'kayim mitzvahs. Oh, he also agrees you should fulfill mitzvahs. Learn Torah. But why? Mitzad ha-seichel, loy mitzad hiyosem rotzon Hashem. Fulfill fulfill mitzvahs because it's intellectually correct, and not because they're Hashem's will. V'gam hu maskim shilma Torah, and he also agrees that you should study Torah mitzad ha-seichel shabbat because of the intellect that's in it. V'aymer loy shagam hu ha-yetzirah yilmad imay, and Yetzirah says, I'll be here with you. I'll learn with you the Torah. You're going to learn Torah as a logical thing? Perfect. I'll also learn together with you. The whole story with Alter Rebbe, with Alter Reisa, that tells over about the Yetzirah said, I'm also coming out with you with a medal of Vitebsker, that the Yetzirah also was going to come. By that's how the Yetzirah gets us. When he says, yeah, do it. When the Yetzirah starts telling us to do mitzvahs, but on his conditions, and it should be intellectual, it should make sense, it should be rational, but then eventually he will cease completely from studying Torah and fulfilling mitzvahs at all. And as we go on the Maimar, he's going to explain why this is so, why does that occur in this type of way. Any questions?